Okay, so here we have all the bits, well, in fact not all the bits, because there are actually a few other bits like the flybar and the paddles, but most of the bits that we need to put together in order to make our rotor head. As usual, we're going to start with the head block here, and the first job is to Loctite the various screws on here which are already pre-installed, and then we need to install balls onto these mixer arms as well with some Loctite. And then once we've done that, we can look at making up the flybar cage and installing the flybar. And then after that, we'll be putting the blade grips onto the head, putting the thrust races into the blade grips, and then it will be installing the swash plate and the paddles and the rest of it. So we'll start with the rotor head. Okay, so I've just removed one of the mixer arms, and what I want to show you here is there are actually two holes that the mixer arm can be mounted to the flybar seesaw with. This inner hole here, this is for nimble 3D flight. This outer hole here, this is for stable 3D flight. So for my model I'm going to be going in this inner hole here. Okay, so here's our first piece of work done, which is just installing some balls onto, well, you can see it like that, there we go, balls onto the inside edges of the upper mixers, top and bottom. And I've also installed these onto the nimble 3D settings and removed the screws that hold the seesaw in place in here and Loctited as well. And then once you've done that, you're ready to move on to the next step, which is assembling the flybar cage. Okay, so here we have our flybar cage, and we also have a little packet that goes with these, which has our ball links and rods within it. We just need to make those up, install those onto the centre ball here, and then bolt the flybar cage together, and then that can be installed onto our head block. Okay, and I've made up one of the push rods to go on the flybar cage. I just want to show you here that the manual shows that the gap between the two plastic links should be 10.5mm as displayed on the screen there, and both links need to be made up with the same gap. Okay, and there we have our assembled flybar cage, and that can now be installed onto our head block and positioned in place, ready for the flybar to be inserted through the two of them, which is what I'll show you next. Okay, so there you have the flybar inserted through the flybar cage, through the flybar seesaw, and at this stage what you want to do is just tighten very lightly one of or both of these grub screws just to hold the flybar in place whilst we build up the rest of the head. Okay, so the next job for us to do is to install this plastic tube, which just goes in the centre of the rotor hub like so, and then these dampers need to insert into the recesses there. And before you push those in, you may want to just grease those up with some silicone grease so that they don't get caught up or worn inside the head and can flex and move around a little bit without rubbing. Okay, one thing I do want to show you regarding these dampers is that they have a shape to them. So there's a flat edge, which is this edge here, and then a kind of a chamfered shaped edge, which is this edge here, and the flat edge goes first into the head block, leaving the chamfered edge sticking out or towards the blade grip. Okay, so there's our damper installed. You can see our rounded sort of chamfered edge here sticking out, and the next thing for us to do is to install our feathering shaft through here, and then we're ready to install the blade grips. Okay, so there we have our feathering shaft installed, and the next is to put together our blade grips, which means installing the thrust races. Okay, so here we have our thrust races, and Align does actually make this reasonably easy for us because on each side of this thrust race there's some writing. One says in and the other says out, and the one that says in goes in first into the blade grip, and the one that says out goes in last into the blade grip. And so when you actually look into your blade grip to look at your installed thrust race, you can actually see the word out on it. The thrust race itself needs to be greased, so we need to put some grease around here, and then when we install this, we install it with this open face sort of down, so it goes in that way, and that way it holds the grease, the cupping, the natural cupping of this bearing holds the grease in rather than allowing it to come out. Okay, so I've now assembled my thrust race, put the out on the top, and underneath that I've got my bearing with the cupped or open-ended side of it facing the other side of the race. The blade grip itself already has the radial bearings installed within it, so we just need to put the spacer, this thing here, into the blade grip first, and then insert our thrust race down into there with the word out facing out towards us. And if you've done it right, that's what you end up with when you look into your blade grip, and that's ready to be installed onto our feathering spindle. Also, we need to make sure that this piece here, as you can see this is loose, this needs to be Loctited as well. Okay, so there we have our blade grip installed onto the rotor head. If I just rotate this slightly, you can see, there we go, it's actually on the feathering shaft. And then the next thing we need to do is take our feathering shaft bolt, which is this fella here, put some Loctite on him and screw him into there. And then we repeat that for the other side. One thing just before I forget to mention it is that you must remember to put the little spacer between your blade grip and the rotor head, otherwise you'll find that you'll get some binding and it won't rotate nice and smoothly. Okay, and if you've followed the instructions so far, you should end up with something looking a bit like this. You can see the little spacers between the blade grips there, and the align writing to the top of the rotor head. And the next job for us is to install the head stopper. It's fairly straightforward, just bolt that onto the top, and then we can start working on the washout and the swash plate. Okay, and there we have the head button installed.